Welcome back, everybody, to Constructive Uncoupling, the podcast devoted to amicable divorces. I'm Judy Weigel, your host and amicable divorce expert. Why? Because that's all I do, amicable divorces. Today's episode is about timing and compromise in divorce. Just in life, timing and compromise are really important. But when you're going into the divorce process, timing and compromise are essential. So, what is divorce? First of all, it is an emotional roller coaster and an emotional juggling match. Divorce is like putting your head in the lion's mouth and risking that it's eaten. Divorce is also like walking a tightrope of fragile decisions. Make the wrong decision and you fall to your peril. Sometimes you feel like the clowns have taken over and you're in a clown car of never-ending changes. When is it going to stop? I used to work for the circus. I'm quite conversant with circus metaphors that can apply to any part of life. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, let the divorce begin. So I want to be really helpful to you today, and let's talk about compromise and let's talk about timing so that you can get a handle on both and get through the decision making of the divorce the best way you can. Compromise. Well, the one thing with offering compromise in a divorce and wanting to talk things out is you avoid a trial. So in a trial, there are no compromises. In a trial, the judge will tell you what the decisions are going to be. And sometimes that is the only way for people to get divorced, but not for the bulk of people getting divorced. For the bulk of people getting divorced, they can really talk things out, or through their attorneys, they can talk things out. Once you get to trial, those are for people who can't talk at all. And even through their attorneys, they can't reach decision making. So if you really want to keep control over the decisions in the divorce, compromise, get a mediation going, get attorneys involved if you can't talk on your own. But when you go to talk, you have the law. The law is your reference point to start, and the law is your deciding point if you can't compromise. But it's really important that everybody knows the law, because once you know the law, you kind of know the universe of rules surrounding whatever you have to discuss, whether it's the division of a house, the division of a business, child support, spousal support, dividing pensions. You have the law involved. And those areas that really are a little tricky, it's not the pensions. The pensions are really easy to divide. The law is very specific about, in this community property state of California, the law is pretty specific about the alternate payee, meaning the other spouse gets half of what was put into the pension from date of marriage to date of separation. That's kind of just a general rule, general law. But things that get a little muddy are dividing the house, spousal support, child support, the co-parenting plan, and custody. So these are the areas that really require compromise. And let's just say you're in a situation where you feel that your voice wasn't heard in the marriage. And so how can you feel that you're going to have a voice at all once the divorce is filed for? You have the law. The law is the voice that you go to, even if you feel you haven't had a voice in the marriage. Number 2, compromise actually saves you money even while you're working with attorneys. So it's expensive working with attorneys, no doubt. It's less expensive if you're able to go to what we call a document preparation company and go into mediation, well, depending on how much the mediators cost. Mediators have a wide range of to $200, $225 an hour, up to $750 and $1,000 an hour. I don't know that the skills are really much different, but attorneys will charge more than non-attorney mediators. It's just life. So I charge less than attorney mediators when I mediate, but you just may need attorneys. That's still better than going to court where you have zero control over the decision making. So be prepared, even if you have to hire attorneys, to do some give and take with your attorneys. But compromise saves you more money if working with legal document assistants like me, a paralegal on steroids, and mediators. So you'll spend less money filing without an attorney, and you'll spend less money with a non-attorney mediator. And by the way, sometimes attorney mediators are better than non-attorney, not because their skills are different, but because in some mediations you need the law constantly referenced. And I think attorney mediators are really good for that. But you'll save even more money if you're willing to compromise and you hire document assistant companies or mediators. But regardless of how much, and this is another point, regardless of how much one spouse may have made in the marriage, compromise while filing for divorce will end it sooner. So it really doesn't matter who has made more. Compromise is compromise is compromise. And a lot of times the person who's made less is the person who feels they have less of a voice. I just talked to somebody yesterday where it was actually the woman who owned the company, the family business that supported the family. And I was talking to the husband who said, because they do want to go through, they want to do this without attorneys after they get legal advice. They want to do the document preparation and mediation option. But the husband was the one that was saying to me, I feel like I'm leaving the marriage with nothing. And I said to him, it's a community property state, California. Nobody leaves with nothing. But that actually, and I spoke to a woman today who said the same thing. I don't feel like I had a voice in the marriage. I make less than him. It does not matter how much you make. What matters is you have law governing decisions ultimately if you can't make decisions on your own. But if you know the law, you can work within it to make compromises. And the one who has made less money, it absolutely doesn't matter. You have an equal voice when you go to negotiate. And the last point I wrote down for this, for compromise, for the area of compromise is the big ticket items where compromise is really necessary. It's spousal support, it's how to deal with the family residence, it's the co-parenting plan, child support, and all the miscellaneous costs that go into child support. Those are the areas that we really deal with when we go into mediation, which is where compromise has to be exercised. I said a few minutes ago that dividing pensions and retirement plans is so much easier than discussing spousal support, child support, etc. And it's because we all know the pensions are going to be divided. Honestly, I haven't met a couple yet that didn't know the pension was part of the of the divorce. But the times when I see pensions really being used in a compromise situation are really with law enforcement and firemen. These two professions, and I've asked law enforcement professionals and firemen who come into the office, I said, are the pensions sacred because you're in a very high-risk business and you wait for the day that you're going to retire and those pensions they're sacred to you? And so what I've seen law enforcement and firemen do, I've seen them give more of the house so that the other spouse doesn't touch the pension. It really comes out equally, but the compromise will be you can even have the house. Even if my portion, this is a fireman and a policeman talking, even if giving you my portion of the house is more than you would get from my portion of the pension, do it. It's worth it to me. Isn't that interesting? And I'm always fascinated with that these two professions would readily give up more than their half of the equity in a house and more than what their spouse would get if dividing the pension, because those pensions are sacred. So just amazing. But compromise even comes in this one last area, and that is who's the petitioner and who's the respondent. There's a compromise there. So let me just say, it doesn't matter who the petitioner is and it doesn't matter who the respondent is. You have equal voices. I just, just to make it easy, I say to the woman, to the wife, well, are you going to change your last name? Did you take your husband's last name? And do you want to change your last name? And so if she says yes, I say, okay, then be the petitioner. But if the husband files a response, it doesn't matter. There's an equal voice to both of them. But that's even a negotiable part. And when you file is a negotiable point. Compromise is from start to finish. And so when you finally accept that everything is a compromise and that everybody has an equal voice, you will really get through all the decisions much easier. All right, let's go to timing. Timing is everything, they say, right? And it is. Timing is fascinating. In all parts of our lives, timing is everything. And within that entire concept means there's a lot of sensitivity when there comes to making decisions. So let's say people start a divorce, and after they file, after we serve the respondent, and let's just say the respondent files a response to the petition, sometimes I get calls and people say, can we just wait? And this is why. It is so emotional just to start the divorce filing that sometimes people just have to take a breath and walk away for a few months until they can come back to the second part, which are the disclosure forms. So that in and of itself spoke boatloads to me. And what that makes me and every other industry professional take note of is we don't really know what's going on in the lives of the people getting divorced, but we know that timing is everything and you can't push people. So if both people mutually want to wait, you have to let them alone. The only thing that's going to change that is A, the couple themselves says, okay, I'm ready. Or B, the court sends a letter and says, okay, so we need to see something else going on. We need to see some more filing. You're taking a little too long. And honestly, nobody ever knows when those letters are going to get sent out. So under the section of timing, it's along with compromise. Timing is essentially important, and they are cousins to one another. Whether it's leading up to the divorce filing or throughout the divorce filing, everybody has to be sensitive about timing. Here's a nice little example, though, of when both people are not on the same page about timing. So let's just say they both spouses wanted to take a break for a little bit, or one spouse wanted to take a break and the other didn't. Well, the other generally says, okay, I'll give you a little time, and waits maybe a couple months, 2-3 months, but then nothing changes with the spouse that needed to take a break. So when the other spouse wants to move ahead, we do have to engage the other person to say, can you maybe explain what's going on, because your spouse now wants to move ahead? Are you okay moving ahead now? If not, what do you need time-wise before you can move ahead? This is really sensitive, because if the spouse who wants to move ahead, they can force it. They really can. There are different ways to do it with filings. I'm not going to get into that now, but they can force moving ahead. So everybody has to be sensitive to each other. Another aspect. Once into the filing, emotions will get triggered at different times, each for different spouses. Okay, things will be said. Things will come up that have to be decided on. You'll be out. You won't even be talking to your spouse. Something will come up at an event that you're at or with friends that you're with, and all of a sudden your emotions are stoked. It's very interesting that will either cause people to pull back and do nothing or cause people to a little more aggressively move ahead. So just be sensitive to those trigger points, because when timing is approached in a rough manner, it can have negative consequences. So the timing has to always be approached with sensitivity. And another point, sometimes walking away from the filing process for a breather is smart if both spouses needed it. But as I said before, if both spouses don't need it, then you really should consider accommodating your spouse if you're the one kind of dragging your feet. Oh, I just had another husband call me yesterday. I knew the wife. I knew. I had a gut feeling the wife was going to get an attorney. He just wasn't doing his disclosures. This is where people fall down on timing a lot. It's those disclosure forms. So after you file for the divorce, serve the respondent, and let's say the respondent files a response and you serve that on the petitioner. The next step are the disclosure forms. So they're not hard to do, but they could be time consuming if you have a lot of assets, or one spouse could avoid doing them if they're embarrassed, if they don't make a lot of money, if they don't have any assets, if they feel that they've not handled money properly. I guarantee you that spouse will not want to do their disclosures. Guarantee it, because it's embarrassing. And if it's the man, it's super embarrassing. So once it comes to the disclosure forms, if one spouse does them and the other spouse is dragging their feet, please know that the court has provided a time frame in which they would like the disclosures done. And it's 60 days from the time each spouse is pulled into the case. So most industry professionals will at least refer to the 60-day time frame and then ask that spouse how much longer you need. So this husband that called me yesterday, he was so far beyond the 60 days, it's not even funny. And she waited, and she waited, and she waited. And he even came into my office so that I could once again go over them with him and promised to get them in within a week, then 2 weeks, then 3 weeks. And I just knew it was going to end up in an attorney's office, and it did. And he called yesterday and he verified that. And I don't know what's going to happen from this point forward, but that's what will happen. So if one spouse truly abuses timing and has been given a lot of rope, the other spouse will go to an attorney and the attorney can compel them. And it's over. If you don't do it, there's sanctions, there's court. And why aren't you doing them? That goes into the why. What's the problem? Are you hiding things? Is that why you're not doing them? Well, it's going to come out anyway. It really is. Forget hiding. There's no place to hide at some point. And with this particular husband, he was making money. He owned a business. I really don't know why. All I know is it ended up in an attorney's office, and now you're going to spend more money. But maybe that's what has to happen. Timing with the co-parenting schedules. Okay, you need time to work out the co-parenting schedules. What you think may work may not work once it's instituted. Maybe it won't work for the child. Maybe it won't work for one parent or both parents. So in regards to timing, if you're trying to get through the divorce quickly and you're both on the same page about doing that, and you have children, please be aware that you do need time to test out the co-parenting schedule. And there's one aspect about the co-parenting schedule that really takes a lot of time working out, and that's this concept of nesting. Do you all know what nesting is? Well, for those who don't, nesting means, and theoretically it sounds great, in reality, get ready. So nesting is the children stay in the house where they're living as the divorce is being filed for and executed. A second place is procured, and both spouses live in there, but one at a time. So one spouse will stay in the house with the children on their co-parenting time. The other spouse is in the second residence. And then when it's the other spouse's time to be in the primary residence, the spouses switch places. Well, it actually sounds like a really interesting concept, and once in a while it actually works, but it doesn't always work because both spouses are sharing space. And depending on the people, depending on the spouses, and the reason for the divorce, and where you're at emotionally with each other, the level of respect you have, is there no more blame? Is it a mutually desired divorce, so therefore there's no forgiveness? Maybe it'll work. Those are the situations where it will really work. But if it's not that, if there are tensions still, if one or both spouses has to work through the emotions of the divorce, of the marriage leading into the divorce, you're not going to want to see each other's stuff laying around. You really aren't. You're going to want your own space to go to. So nesting can be right for some couples, but not all couples. Just leave this with the co-parenting schedule is something that actually needs time to be experienced and tweaked. Another point, a need for therapy in order to move forward for the benefit of the family. Well, a lot of people need therapy. Divorce is so heavy duty for yourselves, the spouses, and for your children. And just to make sure that you're all going through this in a way that will allow you to come out thriving and benefiting from this new situation, as ironic as that may seem, or as weird as that may seem, divorce is a new beginning. You may not have wanted the divorce, but it's a new beginning. It allows you to process, okay, so why did this happen? How can I, if you're a relationship-oriented person, how can I not let this happen again? How much control do I have? If you're somebody that feels they were controlled in the marriage, this is definitely a new beginning and an opportunity for you to grow as a strong, healthy, independent adult. But if you need therapy, you may need to wait on making decisions for the settlement. Get through some therapy first. Make sure the kids are doing well. Make sure you're doing well so that when you make your decisions and you're compromising, you're doing it as a strong individual and you're not caving. You're not over-compromising. So when therapy kicks in, you may need to wait, and therefore the timing has to be a little loose before you move forward to complete the divorce. When there are disagreements on big ticket decisions, and we see that in the mediation, I and a lot of good mediators say, why don't we take a breather on this? We did a lot of work in the mediation. We see all of the options that you have available. Now go and just process. If you need to talk to some people, talk. Okay, when I say when you need to talk to some people, I honestly don't mean family and friends. Family and friends are going to be generally aggressive and fight for you, but that's not what you need. You need legal professionals involved to give you information so that you can sit down quietly and really go through what works for you. And that's the only important thing. what works for you. And what works for you may not make sense to your family and friends. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to. It only has to make sense to you. So on the very big ticket decisions, take your time, both of you, to see how you really want the decisions to be, because you're going to live with them for the rest of your life. Timing in mediation. Okay, so you're in mediation and you're still fighting. Stop the mediation for a while. Stop the decision making for a while. You need to realize why you're still fighting. And you need to get over that. You need to deal with the reason why you're fighting before you come back and make decisions. And I've had people that have taken 3, 4, and 5 years until they finally came back to me and said, okay, we're ready. We're just now ready. Who knew? Nobody knows how long it's going to take. And as long as the court allows you to keep your case open and you need time with big ticket decisions, then take the time. You know, here's a decision. Maybe the co-parenting plan is so difficult and your child may be a junior or senior in high school. Wait till they leave high school, and then you take that decision making off the table. You know, that's happened before, where the teenager themselves said, you know what, this is how I want it to be. And the teenager kind of called the shots. And then when graduation from high school was done, we finished the divorce. It is funny, timing. Timing is everything. Or, when should the filing begin? Well, the filing should begin when emotions have quieted down and blame is no longer needed. We need to blame each other. Sometimes we simply need to blame each other to process the anger. Once all the blame is done, then file. Unless there's domestic violence, or unless there is an extenuating circumstance where you got to do it now. Like maybe there's a debilitating illness. Maybe one parent or one spouse has to leave the country for work, or has to leave the county, leave the state. Okay, so maybe you have to file then. Maybe there's an immigration issue going on, and that is timing specific, right? So when the divorce starts is so important, and sometimes you need mediation before you need filing. You know, I always used to think that filing should come first, get your disclosures done, and then let's sit down and mediate. But I realized after a while that the filing is it's such a strong statement when people start the filing for divorce, and they're not ready for that strong statement until they've sat down and really sorted out the details of their settlement decisions. And it was me working in the field long enough and listening to people's needs that made me say, no, let's ask the couple what they need. And I just talked to a couple today. Mediation is preferred first before they file, so that the woman, and this was the woman who said this, the woman said she felt that she always had less of a voice in the marriage, and the husband was ready to refinance the house and do things that were frightening to her. And so for her, mediation was better to do first before they filed. And I said, okay, then that's fine. Then that's what it should be, and that's what we will do. And lastly, on my list of issues for timing is post-divorce ongoing decisions, like spousal support and child support and the division of the house. You know, timing is everything when there's spousal support after the divorce, because the person who's paying can lose their job or change. Okay, so this is complicated, and I'm stumbling over myself even saying it, but there's an example of somebody who I know, I didn't do their divorce. It was a high net worth marriage. Therefore, there was a lot of spousal support to be paid. The divorce was already done when I met this woman, and she was explaining to me that her husband goes in and out of work. And when he's not working, there's no spousal support. When he is working, there is. So that's not the issue. When there is work, there is support. The issue is there are long enough periods where there is no work. So what do? Well, she sought the help of the mediator, who they both really liked, and to try and see if the mediator could do something about maybe a buyout so that she didn't have to deal with in work, out of work situations. It was making her crazy. And the ex-husband wouldn't budge. So what she did, just to make her life easier, was she moved. She no longer had minor children in the house, so she didn't need all the bedrooms. So she moved to a smaller place that she could afford out of what she was making, so that she could not stress over her husband being out of work. Her ex-husband, sorry about that. And that made all the difference in the world. She looked fabulous when I ran into her. I mean, literally, she looked fabulous. She had managed the stress. She had decided to let time take its course. And she knew her husband well enough to know that he would be back paying spousal support when he was able to. That was an amazing story. I loved looking at her. She looked healthy again. I loved hearing how she embraced dealing with time by making her own decision to control her her lifestyle. And it wasn't a bad choice. She was not unhappy. She actually liked scaling down. Scaling down has its advantages. It really does. If we can get over the ego we have in having a larger place, and if we can accept the fact that who cares? It's our life. We're not beholden to anybody for the type of place we live in. As long as it's safe, it's clean, we enjoy ourselves in our space, forget what everybody else thinks of, for heaven's sakes. Child support is tough. Child support is really tough. So if the payor of child support has an inconsistent work schedule, that's really hard, because you have ongoing expenses for people other than you, your children. Well, there's child support services who can get involved and start calculating the arrearages. But you can make a compromise on lowering child support if that works for the payor. If the payor honestly is trying to meet their obligations, and I mean really honestly trying to meet their obligations. What if their industry is dried up? What if they just got fired? Or what if they just lost their job because the company closed? These are hard things. This is life. So instead of getting angry, instead of calling attorneys, see if you can work out a time schedule that accounts for arrearages, or even if you don't care about arrearages on the support payment, if you can at least meet the miscellaneous costs for your child and meet those. I just had another couple, and I'm no different than any other person working in this business. I had a couple that already got divorced, and unfortunately, husband lost his job. And her business wasn't doing well, to the point where she was actually considering moving out of state and living with relatives, or moving out of state where she felt she could just go into a different career and her expenses would be lower, because anybody living in California who's listening to this, we know how awfully expensive it is everywhere to live. So not only is she having a hard time meeting her own expenses because of her business, now he's not able to pay full support. So they're negotiating, well, what can he pay? So that they can at least do something and avoid court. I mean, they both want to avoid court. Lastly, the division of the house. So a lot of times the house can't be divided during the divorce. And we either put a very specific time frame in the agreement where they will come back and deal with the division of the house, or it's open-ended. Well, the open-ended stuff, if you don't have, the open-ended stuff is tough, because then if one person wants to move forward on the decision the other person doesn't, what do? Only a court can decide. So with the division of the house, try and be as specific as you can in your settlement agreement with out clauses, so to speak. But when the house isn't, sometimes when the house isn't divided during the divorce, sometimes it's because it can't be. Maybe it's at zero equity because a lot of loans were taken out in order to meet expenses, but we're not in a bad real estate situation. And you need time to let the equity build up again so that you can either sell it and divide the equity, or so that there's equity to divide. So you have to look at the division of the house in terms of several different things. The market itself, is it going to be kind to you? The ability to refinance the house so that you can pay the other person the equity? And what if you are the lower earning spouse and you're the one living in the house, and you thought that you could refinance at a certain point, but you can't? You just, I guess, have to deal with reality. And if you are the spouse that is the higher earning spouse, and you want to pull your equity out, the lower earning spouse, you just simply have to deal with that reality. And if you want to hang on to the house because you don't want to disrupt the kids, I've done other podcast episodes on the kids will be fine. And I want to refer you to a video called Split, S-P-L-I-T. It's a 30-minute video, and it's all about kids talking about their reaction to divorce, what's important to them, what's not important to them. And every single one of these children from age 5 to age 13 all said the same thing. We thought it would be really important that we stay in the house, or that, the house was there for one of our parents. And they all said, bottom line, simply didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was that their parents got along. So if you're really hanging on to the house for your kids, and the smartest decision is to sell it so that you both have equity walking away, and it's hard to maintain anyway for one spouse, don't worry about the kids. I think the kids will be fine. I believe all the kids in these videos, and there's more than that with kids talking, and it's always the same thing. We just care that our parents get along, that's all. So I hope this podcast was helpful to all of you. Timing and compromise, these are two essential aspects of getting through an amicable divorce. Thank you so much once again for listening to Constructive Uncoupling, the podcast devoted to amicable divorces. This is Judy Weigel, your amicable divorce host. I look forward to speaking with you on our next podcast. And again, my company is Divorce Resource Incorporated. And you can always reach me at Judy@constructiveuncoupling.com.